to this week's Grab and Go Growth Tactics webinar. My name is Jim Wilcox. I own a Sandler Performance Center in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and South Bend, Indiana. We cover the great state of Indiana. I am joined by two of my esteemed colleagues, Mr. Tim Barry and Mr. John Vanderslice. Gentlemen, would you please introduce yourselves?
Yeah, Tim, can you guys hear me? It looks like I froze up.
No, I can hear
John,
you.
Good.
I can hear you, John.
Good. Good, Tim.
So I'm Tim Barry. I am the owner of the Sandler Performance Center in the great Republic of Texas, Fort Worth specifically, and just glad to be here again working with you two Eagles and sharing some wisdom and some things that you can all take away. So
Tim is always so nice to say that. Tim is an Eagle himself by a lot. But thank you, Tim and Jim, for having me. So my name's John Vanderslice. I'm in beautiful southern New Jersey. Not there's anything wrong with northern New Jersey, but just making that distinction. We're pretty far from New York, near the seashore. And I own a Sandler Performance Center here in New Jersey. And our client base is what we call the Delaware Valley. So it's around Philadelphia, southern New Jersey. And our clients, much like Jim's and Tim's, are a mix of, leadership, management, and sales. So what we do here in beautiful New Jersey.
Wonderful. Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Today's topic is on our top sales behaviors. Just a housekeeping note, we've experienced a little bit of instability with the Zoom platform today. If the screen disappears, it will reconnect very briefly, so bear with us here. Hopefully we have no problems moving forward, but we want to ask John to kind of kick us off as we talk about this very first top sales behavior, which has to do with keeping your current clients.
Yeah, so thanks, Jim, again. So I was thinking about this really the last few weeks and talking to a lot of people in various size companies, a lot of different verticals. People are searching for answers, right? I mean, some people are scared. Some people are tentative with their business. Some people are not sure, should my goals be changing? Does my behavior still make sense? And here's what I would tell you from my experience. I was a turnaround guy for about, almost 25 years, which means we took businesses that were failing and underperforming, turned them around and moved on to the next one. Now, the reason I tell you that is really for this reason. I would love to be able to fib and say that was really complicated work, that there were a lot of complex formulas you needed to know and algorithms and, oh God, too much to explain. But I would be very disingenuous because for the most part, not there wasn't complexity, there was. But on the sales side, which was the number one reason we found for business failure, by the way, which was number one, lack of new revenue, consistent revenue, which is kind of what we're talking about, was the number one reason we saw for that failure and underperformance, is really what we found. It wasn't anything complex or anything magical. It was really doing basic things, fundamental things, as we maybe said this before, consistently. And I think sometimes we're in stress or we're in uncharted waters like we are, we kind of lose our way and we look for things that maybe are unnecessarily complex. And I don't like complexity. I like to take complexity away. So as I thought about this and what our clients are doing and what a lot of people are finding very beneficial is kind of going back to some basics. And everybody wants to grow their business, right? We all say, I want to grow the business. But what we know is there's a more granular way to do that. I used to hate that word, granular. We had a Swiss consulting company that we worked with, and the Swiss consultant would always say, we have to be more granular. And I'm like, what does that mean? Well, when you look in what we call the CARE model, K-A-R-E, I think many of you are probably familiar, some of you not, keep, attract, recapture, and expand. It's a much more granular way to look at managing your business. And it works. Rather than just saying we're going to adopt one strategy and one set of tactics to grow the business, we look at it and we say, okay, who is it that we want to keep? Who are those high profit accounts that if we lost tomorrow, we'd really be bummed out? What is our strategy and tactics for keeping that business? Now, easier said than done. And what you really need to do is look at what I find now. It's a great time to really get granular and look at, on the keep side, first of all, who are those people? Who are those people that we want to make sure we wrap our arms around, virtually, of course, and keep them in the fold, that we'd be really bummed out if we lost them. And first, number one, write down who those people are, figure out who they are, and then adopt your strategy and put some tactics in place to do that. Now, here's what I will say, and much of this will in some ways overlap with what else we're going to talk about, which is expand. Again, those specific tactics, but things like, I see in this day and age right now, there's cases where we have maybe only one relationship at a key account. And that's a dangerous place to be, because if that one contact happens to leave for whatever reason, especially now when companies are right sizing and downsizing and our contact goes out the door, we're in trouble. So what do we have to do to make sure that we've gone deeper and wider in those accounts? Have there been any recent changes in those accounts? Is there any action we can take to reduce risk? I will tell you this, there's a lot of businesses out there across the board where I'm hearing that, hey, I'm hearing a lot more from you guys than I am from my current vendor. Our clients are hearing that. That's going to pay really big dividends down the line. So on that keep strategy especially, make sure that you get granular. Figure out who are those people that you really want to keep. You'd really be bummed out if you woke up tomorrow morning and you read on your cell phone or on your computer that they've left you. And where are you vulnerable? And make sure that you address that. And it's a great time to button that up. Is that a fair enough answer, Jim? I don't want to go too long on the keep piece.
I think that's wonderful, John, and thank you for sharing that. So top sales behavior, ensure that you are keeping, those clients that you really want to protect, need to protect, especially during this situation that we found ourselves in. I'm going to ask Tim next to share a little bit about the next top sales behavior, which is lead generation.
Yeah, so before we get started, I want everybody to notice in the chat box, there's a little arrow next to, it says all panelists and attendees. And so I'm going to ask a question in regards to lead gen. And I want everybody just to throw in their rough estimates. So the question is how much time do you spend, what percentage of time do you spend during the course of your work week actively hunting for new business? So everybody, make sure you've got all panelists and attendees, and let's jump into the chat and get on that. So we see 98%. Holy cow, phones is a killer for sure. He's going crazy. 50, 50, 50, 35 for Adam from Affinity. That's good. 80%, not nearly enough. Lisa Thompson hates cold calling. 20% loaded question from Blandy. I love Blandy. 40 to 50%. Okay, so thanks for jumping in and sharing with the group. Here's a couple things, and we've covered this in the recent past, so I'm not going to belabor the concepts for too long. But what we know is that top performers in the sales world spend 60% of the white space on their calendar actively hunting for new business. They calendar block this stuff out, and they protect their calendar with amazing discipline, because they realize that while, yes, we can get busy in the hysterical activity of delivering services and whatnot, the real true measure of a top performer is the ability to do it over and over and over again, and not suffer from the boom bust of what many salespeople have. And what we know is the sales cycle kind of works like this. When you have no business, you spend 99% of your time prospecting for new business because, well, you don't have any. But then what happens is you start to close some business, and then we get quote unquote busy with the business of delivering the stuff that we're doing, and we forget to actively keep prospecting. So three things to avoid this is calendar block that 60% of time in your work hours. But then what we define as pay time, and pay time is when your customers are online in front of their computers and at work. So 60% of your pay time, and you've got to calendar block this stuff out. The second concept of besides calendar blocking is you've got to have calendar discipline, which means that the 8,000 emails and quote unquote fires that are going to come into your sphere, you've got to maintain the discipline to continue to do that. And then the third piece of lead gen for high performers is you have to have a consistency, commitments to consistency. This can't be like oh, I did good for a day and a half and now I'm gonna forget about it. Top performers over and over and over again continue to execute 60% of their calendar hunting for new business. And let's not forget that in spite of the fact that we're in this COVID-19 world and we have changed a lot of the ways we do business, even with, let's go crazy and say there's going to be a 30% reduction in gross domestic product in the second quarter of 2020, that still means that there's $4 trillion of business being transacted. It's not going to be easy, but again, high performers know this, and with consistent blocking, discipline, and commitment to consistency, they keep going.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim, for sharing your thoughts on that. Appreciate that. Third top sales behavior that I want to talk about is leveraging our referrals. And if you've been around Sandler at all, you've probably heard this saying before, that money does grow on trees. We specifically refer to the referral tree here. And now more than ever is a great time to really take a hard look at our networks and our circles of influence and really figure out, number one, how do we pay it forward? How can we be connectors of people? That is one of my whys. I'm a big connector of people. I'm always looking for ways that I can make connections that will benefit others. That has proven over and over to come back and benefit me in some way, shape, or form. I'm not a scorekeeper, so I can't give you statistics on that. I do that with zero expectation, but I do know it's come back to be beneficial. Number two, I do want to look at my circles of influence. LinkedIn obviously is our best tool for this. Who am I connected with? So I may reach out to John, for example, and say, John, I'd like to find out who I can connect you with. By the way, happen to know that you're connected with Tim Barry. I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about Tim's business during this time. And based on what John shares with me, hey, does it make sense for an introduction here? I believe that a disciplined approach as it pertains to referrals can benefit us, especially now more than ever. Really taking a hard look at the referrals. How do I pay it forward? How do I connect people? And then how am I asking for those referrals? Certainly with relationships, we want to be able to do that. We're also believers that asking earlier is better than taking the time and waiting for some sort of service delivery relationship to happen. We know that our prospects love us the best earliest in the game. And so let's leverage that and let's find that money that's growing out there on trees. So John, Tim, any other comments in regards to referrals? I think for me, it's pretty short and sweet and to the point. We've got to make that a consistent behavior. And to Tim's point, it's probably something I ought to calendar block.
Yeah, I think Jim, yeah, it's important. I mean, it's some things we talk about a three-legged stool, right, on our activity. And I mean, asking for referrals, it's one of those things that I think we understand it, and somehow it gets away from us. And I think we have to remind ourselves and understand that in human nature, people are geared to want to help us. But I think maybe our head trash gets in the way sometimes.
Or we talk ourselves out of it by saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to wait until, you know, John witnesses some awesomeness from me. And you may witness the awesomeness, but somebody says, hey, I think John was concerned, I might hold off on that. And it doesn't have to be that case. So, John, I want to go back to you and have you talk a little bit about the importance of expanding opportunities at this time.
Yeah, and again, I think this is another one, and I think this can kind of all knit together and kind of cross some boundaries here. So fundamentally, I mean, expand in our repertoire, and we think about, again, growing the business. Expand is, where are we doing some business now? We have a client. I have a client, for example, and they're in the healthcare space, and they do maintenance at hospitals and universities. So a classic opportunity for them to expand, and you'd have to decide if this fits for your business. Not all business is the same, but they do business with the University of Pennsylvania, for example, but they don't do business with all parts of the university. At Temple Hospital and Temple University, they don't do business in all of the departments. So it's a low-hanging fruit where they already have some relationships established. They've already done some business, and they can expand it across the organization doing the same kinds of things. Now, also think about your business. And again, this is a case where you want to take your business and look at it in a more granular way. Where am I doing business now? And don't take this for granted, right? Because we don't know unless we think it through. Get off to the side, get out a pad of paper, think about your accounts. Is there any place where we're doing some business now that maybe we can do more? It could be across the organization, or it could be expand our offering. Maybe they weren't always open to doing everything with us in the beginning, but now times have changed. Maybe there's an opportunity to expand our offering there. And we need to think that out and then figure out, how do we bring that forward? Now, last week, I believe, I have a fantastic memory. Sadly, it just doesn't last very long, but I think it was last week that we talked about AIR, right? I'd love to get your advice. I'd like to get your impression recommendation. Same kind of thing. If I'm sitting down with a facilities manager at University of Pennsylvania, hey, Jim, love to get your advice on maybe who else in the organization I should be having a conversation with. Okay, that just makes sense. Now, also, much like in Keep, it's an opportunity to expand our relationships. Don't just think the product, also our relationships. Where can we get another level deeper in the organization? Maybe up, maybe down, maybe sideways, to protect ourselves. So where can we expand relationships? And there's also nothing wrong with plugging in during these conversations, even though it may not be the same client or prospect. Hey, is there anybody else, again, that it might make sense for me to have a conversation with? So expand even beyond that client. But just be thinking about that. We have good relationships, and my clients are more than happy to refer me or recommend me, even to competitors, really. So we cannot be afraid to have those conversations. So it starts with sitting down, putting it down on paper, and kind of starting with a blank slate and not assuming that we're already doing all we can.
Absolutely. Very good stuff there, John. I appreciate that. Mom taught us a good lesson on assume. So I think that's great advice there. So Tim, when we chatted about this yesterday, you were very passionate about closing the file. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. Thanks for that. One of the things that I find to be interesting is that, I hear a lot of salespeople get caught in the trap of permanently following up on quotes and bids that they had submitted in the past. And while that's an important piece of a lot of people's business, there should be the mindset of close the sale or close the file. And I think that we get caught up too many times. The variable performing salespeople get caught up in the hysterical activity of constantly following up. So what we know is that the high performers, they leverage things, they leverage blocks in their calendar to follow up, but follow up with a purpose. And the concept is that they're going to go for the no on the library of quotes and bids that they have sitting out there, just to get them out of the way. And so the going for the no mentality is important. Blandy points out ABCs of sales always be closing, and it's very, very true. And what I found was that the top performers, they'll leverage even some of their off time to work on closing business. For example, I remember hearing one of my clients called it windshield time. And windshield time was at the end of the day when they had about a 50-minute commute back home. This particular top performer made the habit of bringing a list of all of the open quotes and the open bids that they had done in the previous year. And he called it dialing for dollars. And this cat it was fascinating because most of the time he went in it with a go for the no mentality, but most of the time he would get the no and then he can get rid of it. But every once in a while he would get somebody and reignite that sale, or it would have dropped out of the prospect's mind for a while. And because he was disciplined in doing this, he would drum up new business. And as it turns out, he put an hourly rate to it. This guy made $2,000 an hour by dialing for dollars during his windshield time. So that's just the piece, closing the file. I think, again, top performers have that mindset, windshield time, leverage dialing for dollars, and then going for the no. Get stuff out of the way. Don't be following up forever.
Yeah, and I think that's...
I have to insert one counterpoint, just because, and not all people from New Jersey have to give the counterpoint, but I just another thought, because we just discussed this yesterday. Always be closing from Glengarry Glen Ross. I get it. But right now, I think we have to consider, is now the time to be closing. I think right now we have to keep thinking about always be helping, always be supporting. We had a conversation yesterday with a very bright woman that's going to be on our Monday morning wake-up call next Monday. And she talked about people are hurting their brands right now because they're trying to make quota and they're trying to close business. And it's offensive right now to some people. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't mean we shouldn't go after business, but we've got to be careful. We don't come at it too hard and too sharp an edge. I love what that always be asking. Great questions. So yeah, wanted to throw that in as food for thought.
Yeah, I love that. And we've got to be situationally aware, right? If it's not appropriate, right, we ought to stay away from it. And we don't want to hurt our brand. So good stuff there. Appreciate it. Next thing that we'll talk about, and I'm a big believer in pay time versus no pay time, but now is a great time to really reevaluate or evaluate our market. Where are we selling? And I inserted this one in here because I had a conversation in the past week about some frustration around prospecting activities and the responses that were being gotten from that activity. And when I asked the question of where are you selling into, right? Who are you calling on? Share with me the types of people that you're calling on or companies. They were telling me that they were calling into the automotive industry, right? Well, automotive industry is not exactly moving full steam ahead. And so my question was, where else could you call? And they said, well, there's a lot of other places that I can call, but this is where we historically have made money. And it sounds, the example almost sounds silly. Like, why would you call on an industry that's largely shut down right now or has been scaled back significantly? But we all get into habits, right? We all get into habits and comfort zones. Now's the time to really take a hard look at our market and say, okay, where can I be selling where people are actually buying? And let's create a plan that has me calling there instead of where I might be necessarily comfortable. So I think that spending some time, right? And you've got to manage your own pay time versus no pay time, but spending some time to really evaluate the market and understand where people are buying now, understanding where the opportunities are, and creating that plan over the next 30, 60, 90 days will help you produce results that will impact your business for a long time to come. We can't simply go out and stay in that comfort zone, right? We've got to really take a hard look at our market. We've got to take a hard look at our territories and say, okay, where do I need to be expanding relationships? Where do I need to be asking for referrals? Where do I need to be picking up the phone, making calls, setting Zoom appointments, et cetera? And quite often, those might be in places where we're not necessarily comfortable in calling. And so as a top sales behavior in the moment, I think that it would do us well to really take a hard look at our market. John, I see you shaking your head quite a bit.
No, I'm agreeing with what you're saying. Yeah, I agree.
It's very rare, so I thought I'd capitalize on the agreement.
Yeah, well, hopefully you recorded it. You can play it back for yourself.
It is definitely recording.
Yes. Tim, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think, we've got to challenge the norms, and we can't stick with the status quo. Like the market has been flipped on its head. And so I fully agree with you. We have to look at, okay, is our ideal client profile still that? Is our market going to be the same? And how do we shift and adjust to be able to deliver value and help, in this time of chaos? So no, I love the whole thought of reevaluating. You got to reevaluate everything at this point.
Well, here's the second thing, and I think you kind of touched on this. The second thing is looking forward in terms of evaluating our market is how is this scenario going to change moving forward, right? We know in our business that we're going to be doing, this is now a series. We are doing this moving forward in terms of the Wednesday grab and go. We feel that this is important. There's a need for it. The market has told us that, we have an appetite and we'll participate. Streaming training for us is something moving forward, right? And that was coming ahead of COVID, definitely accelerated. We've had to make some adjustments in different ways, all three of us, in the way that we are doing streaming. I think personally that for many companies, at least the ones that I serve, not all of them, but many of them will change the way that they prospect. So instead of having road warriors, right, in their car across large territories or on airplanes, when I look at my market, a lot of my market can easily be served by picking up the phone, having a Zoom call, and then we can make a decision as to whether we travel or not. I think that's going to be a change that's going to have some staying power. And so the question becomes, when I really critically look at my market, my territory, what are changes that I can anticipate and start practicing now? So that's another aspect of really reevaluating and evaluating your market. Any final comments from either of you with 1 minute to go, John or Tim?
My last comment, I would say one other thing, kind of going back to what I said early. I think in times of struggle and change, sometimes we tend to look, we got to do something different, and we have to adjust and we have to adapt. But look for the things that have worked in the past, what has worked for you, and make sure that you don't abandon that. If it worked before, it may very well and very likely will work again. The circumstances may be different, but don't be afraid to go back to what you did that worked and do more of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, John, as we close out, just a parting shot is just based on building on you, John, is what worked in the past may or may not work. You might need more, better, and different. And so look at, if you have to do more of it, if you have to do it better, or if you have to do it differently as you evaluate, what you've done in the past. So good stuff, strong stuff, guys. Thank you.
All right, it's 1 p.m. We appreciate you spending a half an hour with us, investing in yourselves. Hopefully we gave you one or more things that you can grab and take into your markets and go change the world. So appreciate everyone who's attended. John, Tim, have an awesome day. We'll talk soon.
All right, fellas.